morning, everybody in Taiwan, and good evening in Pittsburgh. And today we are very happy to have Professor Chandralekha Singh, expert on physics education, to give us a talk on this International Science Education Forum. The second one, the first one was given by Professor Cedric Villani. And this series is every 3 months we have one distinguished lecture by outstanding scientists who are interested in, who are working on also on science education. So today's topic to be given by Professor Singh is how to enhance STEM by making it inclusive. Inclusive means that with all genders and everything else. But before her lecture, I want to say a few words to introduce Professor Singh. Professor Singh was educated in the famous Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur campus. I was told once that the IIT students usually they would go to MIT if they could not stay in IIT. Am I right? But you read her CV. Professor Singh, she was, I think, first in her class, and graduated there with a master's degree. And then she went to UC Santa Barbara for her PhD. And then I think you went to Illinois
right.
for PhD.
Yeah.
And then you start your career in Pittsburgh in 1995. Since then, you'll stay there. And she's now she's a fellow of the American Physical Society, and her research specialty, if I read correctly, would be theoretical polymer physics and quantum Monte Carlo simulation. But today she's talking about her, her interest in her experience in physics teaching at different levels. And I don't know whether she will be talking about this or not, because one of her interests is on how to teach quantum mechanics. That's interesting, the topic. And I also found that she has worked on a online seminar, I think, online lecture with the Indians Topper Learning Channel, teaching students how to do physics, right? And I have to watch that channel, because this is something that we really need. Because I think that you do things, perform physical. I mean, not physical act, but rather teaching physics by practical, everyday life, experience to students. I think that is that true. You always end up by telling students to say, and remember, it's your universe. And know the rules. And that's very fantastic. Okay, such a long introduction, because really Professor Singh is really an interesting person. And please start your lecture.
Thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be here. I hope you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I'm really delighted to be here. And, anytime you have any questions, you can ask me. So I am actually going to tell you about how to make teaching of science, by STEM, I mean science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, inclusive. So one of the things that when we think about physics, for example, is that if you think about physics, you think about all of the people who came up with the different major discoveries in physics, and this is what it looks like, right? And most of these people seem to be, European people, and there is only one woman here. So, a lot of us kind of like wonder, do we really actually belong in physics? Do we have what it takes to excel in physics? Because we really didn't get the opportunity to actually play a major role in the discovery of everything. And so, and the problem is that right now, at least in the US, when we look at, what a typical colloquium or seminar or conference looks like, this is what it looks like. And if you see here, there aren't that many women, for example, right? So again, as a woman, a person might think, I don't belong in this particular environment. The question is, are we doing anything to actually make sure that people actually feel like they belong? Because the point is that your belonging, your self-efficacy, your belief about how good you are is really important. So it's not really important that you are actually doing well in physics, but also that you feel like you belong there. You have a high sense of self-efficacy about how good you are. Because if those things are not there, then despite being good, you may actually not want to be in those disciplines. So before I get started, one of the things that I want you to think about is if you have a student, and the student is sitting in the 3rd row or 4th row or 5th row, does the student see other students who don't look like them? So for example, if a woman is sitting in the 3rd row or 4th row or 5th row, if you are not speaking, can you mute yourself, please? So if you are actually, sitting on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th row, you might actually, and if you're a woman, you might look at only men in the front and you might say, do I really belong in this class? Also, can it increase a student's anxiety about being in that class? How might the student feel about their potential in this course if they see that nobody looks like them, right? And moreover, what can you do as an instructor? If you are teaching physics or science, what can you do to empower your students so that, regardless of what their identity is, whether they're men, women, minorities, majorities, they all feel like they belong there. They all feel like they can embrace their struggle and use them as a learning opportunity in a low anxiety environment. Okay, so that's basically I want to actually pose to you, right? And I don't really know if you want to actually answer these questions, because if I was there in person, I would have actually asked you to unmute yourself and answer these questions, because I want to get some ideas from you about what you do to make your students feel like they belong. Does anybody want to say something? Anybody has any thoughts about any of these issues?
Anyone want to answer Professor Singh's question? Usually,
how about this last one? What do you do to empower your students so that they embrace their struggles and use them as a learning opportunity in a low anxiety environment? Do you want to unmute yourself and say something about what you do right now to make sure, for example, that if you have only few women, they don't feel like they don't belong there?
So I think I will go first. Hi, Dr. Singh.
Please.
It's so nice to see you online. Hi, yeah. So I think currently all I do is I try to talk to them maybe after class to care about them. But I'm sure that's not enough. So that's why I'm really eager to hear about what you have to tell us today.
Thank you, Shane. Other thoughts? What do you do to make your students feel like they belong and to make sure that they embrace their struggles and use them as learning opportunities in a low anxiety environment? Because notice one of the things is that, if you don't do anything about it, then people who actually are underrepresented in a discipline, people who are minorities in a discipline like women, they are the ones who are more likely to feel like, I don't have what it takes to excel. When they struggle, it may make them feel like, am I struggling because I'm a woman and women are not supposed to be in physics? Because I don't see that there are that many women in physics. If you look at this picture or if you look at this picture, you don't see that many women. Here, you only have Marie Curie here, nobody else. And the point is here also, the situation is not that different. So the point is that if you start struggling and you don't see any role models, you don't see anybody like you, you might feel like, maybe I don't belong in this field. You might start having high anxiety about those issues. So unless you as an instructor do something to alleviate students' anxiety and make them feel like they belong, students might actually not do well just because of the fact that they're feeling anxious. They don't feel like they can excel in physics. They feel like only some people who are can do physics, and those people must be men. And so I think that there is this issue called stereotype threat, which is fear of conforming to a stereotype about your own group. So for example, if women have stereotype threat, that means they're thinking, oh, am I struggling with this particular problem or with this research problem because of the fact that I'm a woman and I don't see that many women in physics? Maybe people like me are not supposed to do well, and these kinds of the awareness of the stereotype can be really taxing. It can cause anxiety. It can actually rob you of your cognitive resources. What I mean by that is that cognitive science says that your brain, your working memory, has fixed number of slots. It only has like 5 to 9 slots. And if some of those slots are being taken up by the anxiety of the situation, then you have less resources available for thinking about problem solving. And so it can hurt your performance because you are just like, oh my gosh, this is a problem that I've never seen before. Maybe I'm the only person who doesn't know how to do it, and that's because I'm a woman. So you get really, anxious about it, right? And the point is, like, for example, if the instructor actually does a problem that is about like angular momentum conservation, and it is about ballerina putting her arms close to herself and putting her arms out, and then you give on the exam a question which is actually about a neutron star that is actually collapsing under its own gravitational force, and there are no external torques on the system, and you ask, if the radius goes from this value to this value, what happens to the speed of the neutron star, right? Now, you may actually think that just because you know that this ballerina problem and neutron star problem, they are both angular momentum conservation problem because there are no external torques on the system. So the angular momentum of the system is conserved. So in both cases, if the neutron star is collapsing or the ballerina is putting her arms close to herself, the angular speed will increase, and you will know how to actually say, oh, initial angular momentum is equal to final angular momentum, and you might be able to find the angular velocity of each of these things. But do you think that if you have never actually done a neutron star problem in your class, and you have not really taught your students how to transfer their learning from one situation to the other, and you only do neutron star problem, and suddenly you are giving to students this neutron star problem, women are more likely to actually get completely anxious about it, because they might be like, why are you giving me an astrophysics problem in a mechanics course? I just don't see what is the relevance of this question, because, the surface feature of that problem can get people so anxious, right? So the point is that, and if people start worrying, am I the only person struggling? That can get them in a negative feedback loop where their, anxiety increases and it hurts their performance. And it can be really demotivating, because people can say, I'm struggling because I'm not as good as other people because I'm a woman. What's the use of actually trying if people like me are not supposed to be successful? So the point is that you can see that these kinds of things can really hurt students. So I'm going to give you another example here. It says, Professor Smith is concerned about high failure rate in his introductory course. And to encourage students to work harder, he starts the class by telling students how difficult the course is, and that usually 25% of the students fail. So they must be careful, particularly if their background preparation is weak. Why do you think that this is a bad thing to say? And who is this thing going to hurt the most? I want to hear from you. Please unmute yourself, and somebody should answer this question. Why do you think this would be a bad thing to say on the first day of your classes? Anybody?
Can someone answer Professor Singh's question? Because she turned us all into students again.
I guess like the weak performance students would drop the course after the very first class if I emphasize the difficulty of the course in the very beginning. So that's my thought.
Absolutely. So thank you, Gongshin. So the thing is, what Gongshin is saying is that, the students who actually came with the lowest prior preparation, and oftentimes these students are the ones, who didn't actually get the opportunity to go to the best schools, to have the best teachers, right? But they still have the prerequisites to be in your course. Your job is to support these students to make sure that they actually do well. Personally, for me, when I'm teaching a course, the students who I'm rooting for all of my students, But the students that I feel most happy about are the ones who tell me in the beginning, Dr. Singh, I had failed my last course, and here I am in your course now. And then they end up getting an A grade, for example. Those are students who have worked really hard and finally, they do well. I feel really good about the fact that they actually came to all the office hours and they really excelled, right? So it's not that these people cannot do well, but if you tell them on the first day that 25% of the class will fail, then some of those students and a lot of those people who are less privileged are the ones who are going to say, what's the point of even trying? If you are saying 25% will fail, I must be in that bottom 25%, right? And so they might actually get so nervous, they will just give up. They won't even try. Or every time, the other thing is that if you think that you're not good at something, you start procrastinating. You don't even want to do the things that you think is not going to be productive, right? So if you know that you're going to be failing because you're going to be in the bottom 25%, you're like, what's the point of even opening my physics book? What's the point of even doing this, right? And so the point is that it's really important not to say these kinds of things. So what I want to say is that similarly, another thing that you notice is that if a student comes to you and asks you a question and says, I actually tried this problem really hard, and I looked at the books, I looked at everything, my notes, and I still can't do it. And you laugh and you say, oh, this problem is trivial. Or this is obvious, the solution to this problem is obvious, or this is a really easy problem. Or you're like, you can't even do this one? Why do you think that that is a bad thing to say? Can somebody unmute themselves and tell me what is wrong with that? Anybody? Because it may sound like, this is not something that happens, but I must say to you, in the US, I hear this from the students. We do a lot of interviews. You can talk to my students, Xian, Guangshin, and other people, and you will see we do a lot of interviews, and students are saying this all the time, that professors are saying things are trivial, things are obvious. And what happens is that if you are a woman, and this is what a professor ends up telling you in a physics class when you are underrepresented, you freeze even more. You're like, oh my gosh, the professor thinks I'm stupid, because here I tried hard and the professor is saying this thing is obvious. So notice the important thing is not what your intention is. Maybe your intentions are good and you're just saying, oh, this is not such a hard problem, you can do it. But the fact is the student has already tried, and after that they've come to you, and now you're calling that problem trivial. The student thinks that you're calling them stupid. They will never come to you again. So the important thing is not what your intentions are, but what is the impact you're having on your students, because it's really your impact that is really important. And those kinds of ambiguous things, the problem is trivial, or 25% of the people will fail. That puts a student in a very ambiguous and uncertain situation. They're like, are you calling me stupid? Are you telling me that I'm going to fail? And this basically, a lot of times, if a person is underrepresented, like a woman, they will start relying on stereotypes. They will say, oh, maybe I'm actually not smart. Maybe I am actually stupid. Maybe I am not, I don't have what it takes to excel because I'm a woman. And that kind of anxiety can diminish your performance because it can rob you of your cognitive resources. It can lower your sense of belonging, decrease your self-efficacy, and it can make you more fixed mindset. By the way, by fixed mindset, I mean your belief about how good, whether intelligence is something that is immutable, or is it something that can grow by working hard and working smart. So people who think that intelligence is immutable are called fixed mindset. People who think that your brain is like a muscle and it can grow with hard work, by working hard and working smart, those are people who have growth mindset. The point is that you can actually put students in this position where they might actually start believing in fixed mindset, even though they should be believing in growth mindset. But the important thing is that you need to create the kind of situation in which students would actually have growth mindset, right? So what I would like to propose to you is this, that as instructors of science courses, our job is not just to teach students efficient problem solving, effective, problem solving skills, or transferring their learning from one situation to the other, or having students develop a robust understanding of physics or chemistry or whatever subject you're trying to teach. Those things are very important. But just like if you were teaching a student how to play tennis well, a game well, you would worry about both strengthening their defenses and offenses, right? And these things are what I call offense. And defense would be things like improving their sense of belonging, improving their identity as a person who can excel in physics, improving their intelligence mindset. That means making them feel like they actually, if their brain is a muscle, and if they work hard and work smart, use their failure as a learning opportunity, they will keep learning and they will keep getting better at whatever they are learning. Improving their self-efficacy, which means their beliefs about, how good they are at physics or chemistry or whatever they are learning. Notice that their interest in a subject is not a fixed thing. It really depends upon all of these things. So if you have a high sense of belonging, if you really feel like, you can excel in physics, if you have growth mindset, if you have high self-efficacy, those things, and if your instructor is saying, yes, you can do it, yes, you can do it, yes, you're making good progress, they can actually develop a higher level of interest, okay? And they can develop higher levels of achievement goal. Because the point is that these things, what a student can achieve and how high they set their goals and how interested they are, those things are a function of how you as an instructor nurture your students and make them feel like they belong, make them feel like they can do it, and keep supporting them and keep, providing them with mentoring and guidance so that they can keep doing better and better. So, because without that, underrepresented students like women are the ones who are likely to say, no, maybe I'm not going to actually, maybe I'm not good enough to do this. By the way, our research also shows that if you use active learning in class, right, you get students to work in small groups. Those are all good things to do. But the thing about it is that, if you actually use active learning and you are not creating equitable and inclusive learning environment, what you will see is that women or other minority students, they might not participate as much as other students, because other students will dominate that discourse, that classroom discourse. And what will end up happening is that, yes, if you're using evidence-based active learning methods, maybe everybody will learn more. But what you might see is that the people who are privileged might end up learning much more than the other group, so the gaps might actually increase in their performance. Does that make sense? So what I'm trying to say is that if people don't feel comfortable participating in those active learning activities because you're not creating an equitable and inclusive learning environment, then certain groups of people will keep dominating the situation, and they are the ones who are going to learn the most, and other people will learn more, but not as much as them, and the gap will be larger. This is what we are finding. So in other words, we find that active learning in an inequitable learning environment actually increases gender performance gaps in physics. This is something that we have found. If you're interested in the reference, I can send it to you. So I think that it's really important for us to think about our students, as people whose defenses and offenses both need strengthening, and we are their coaches, and our job is to work on both of these things simultaneously in our classes, okay? Now I will actually define to you what I mean by the word self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is students' beliefs in their capability to succeed in a particular course or task or subject area, and it can impact students' persistence and engagement, right? And it can affect, science course performance even after controlling for students' prior knowledge and skills. And it can impact how much time students spend on tasks, and it can also impact the effectiveness with which students engage in learning. So I'm going to talk about, our research on self-efficacy and gender in physics. So what we find is that on average, women have lower self-efficacy than men in physics, and also in other disciplines. Also, prior research has focused on gender differences in learning outcomes and self-efficacy, but we wanted to look at gender differences in self-efficacy if the students, men and women, were performing the same. So here is my graphs I'm going to show you. So this is for Physics 1. This is Introductory Physics 1, which is for physics major, math majors, and engineers at University of Pittsburgh. And this is students' self-efficacy. And this is the grade that students got at the end of the semester in Physics 1, right? What you see is that this is the one for women, and this is the one for men. And what you see is that women with A have the same self-efficacy as men with B, right? Now, here is the thing for Physics 2. What you see, Physics 2 is after Physics 1. And what you see is things have gotten a lot worse for women. What you see now is that women who are getting A grade have the same self-efficacy as men almost with C. So now I must say to you that it's really important to note that your grade is not the only thing that matters. You know, what your self-efficacy is, you know, those defenses, those things matter also. What kind of job you take up, what kind of, you know, things you apply for, all of those things will be determined by not just your grade, but also whether you think that you're good at something. That's what self-efficacy is. This is basically about your beliefs about how good you are at physics, right? And if women with A have the same self-efficacy as men with C, they're not going to actually, you know, want to get certain jobs. They may actually even quit because they don't think they're as good as men are. And so you can see that it can really have very detrimental effect on them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And here are some of the things that women said. You know, for example, one woman said, I have pretty low self-confidence when I see how other people are so smart. Other people understand more than I do what is going on in this course. I feel like I have to work a lot harder. For physics, I don't feel like I connect things well. I don't have enough confidence that I'll be able to do it, and it makes me nervous. I don't feel comfortable in this class. Physics gives me a sinking feeling. It kind of scares me. The point is, people are already not seeing role models. They're not seeing other people who are like them. So they're really getting worried about these kinds of things. And if you do not do anything, then, you know, these kinds of things will be like a feedback, you know, they'll go into a feedback loop. These kinds of worries are creating anxiety. They are actually robbing students of their cognitive resources when they are actually trying to study or when they're actually taking a test, or they might even procrastinate because they don't want to do things that they don't think they're good at, right? And so the question is, what can we actually do to improve the situation? So at University of Pittsburgh, we actually did an activity at the beginning of the semester. So this is way at the beginning of the semester, and it's something that you do only one time, right? So we incorporated something that is a field-tested method, and it works really well. And it's called Social Belonging and Mindset Activity. And we carried it out in a calculus-based introductory physics course, right? And so this is a 25-minute activity, which is done in the second recitation class. And so there were 3 instructors who participated. And, you know, 3 instructors, for example, each of them will have many recitation classes, right? So for each instructor, 2 recitations participated, and the other ones were control group. They didn't do this activity, this 25-minute activity. So, sorry?
I'm sorry to interrupt. So I think maybe some of our audience may not really know what recitation is. So could you explain?
Sure. So basically the way it works is that, you know, this particular course has 4 lecture hours, 4 hours, you know, the instructor will meet with the students for 4 hours in a particular week. But then in addition to that, a graduate student who's a teaching assistant, that person will meet for 1 hour and actually go over problems or ask students to work in small groups and work on problems together, right? That's where the active learning is happening in those those are called recitation classes. So they are the classes in which the teaching assistant is working in small groups. So generally, like, the class might be really big, 200 students, but the recitation class will only have, say, 30 students. And the point is, like, in those kinds of small classes in which the teaching assistant is giving to students, problems which are similar to homework problems and having them work in small groups and then going over those problems with them and even giving them a quiz based upon those kinds of things is the place where students get an opportunity to work with other students. And so those are the classes in which this 25-minute activity happened. It's happened in those small classes that are led by the teaching assistants, okay? And so in this particular recitation class, we actually focused on helping students understand that struggling is the only way to learn something new. Even Einstein said, if you have not struggled, you have not really tried to learn anything new, right? So we wanted all students to realize that they should be proud of struggling, because that means that they're already on their way to learning something new, and they should be proud of doing challenging problems. And every time they struggle, they should be patting themselves on their back and saying, yes, I'm doing well, because that means, when you're struggling, you're learning something in the process. You are actually figuring something out, and that's making you become better at those things. And eventually you'll keep getting better and you will be able to solve those problems, right? And then we had like 2 female graduate students work with the teaching assistant who was the recitation instructor. And those people facilitated talks about their own struggles. So those teaching assistants talked about, and the people who facilitated, they actually talked about their own adversity. Oh, when I was a student like you, I was also struggling here. But then I worked hard, worked smart, took advantage of all the resources, went to the instructor, did work problem solving with other students, went to the teaching assistant's office hour, and lo and behold, I ended up doing really well. But they also talked about the fact that they're struggling right now in their research. And that is a good thing, because that struggling keeps making them learn more, and they finally get better at things, right? And they solve whatever research problem they're doing. So the idea was, when you actually emphasize the fact that struggling is the only way to learn something new, and it's a good thing, the idea is that it will reduce students' anxiety, it will reduce their procrastination, it will increase their enthusiasm for solving challenging problems, and it will ensure that the limited cognitive resources are used for problem solving, and not for for the anxiety, right? So now I'll show you what happened. So here in the control group, there was business as usual in the recitation class, and people just worked in small groups solving problems. And in the experimental group in which this intervention happened, in 6 of those recitation classes, basically, as I said, 2 female graduate students went and worked with the recitation instructors, and they said, it can be easy to feel overwhelmed and sometimes wonder, do I really belong here, right? And am I smart enough to make it? And these kinds of experiences are normal, and it'll go away and get better with time. And in fact, physics department really wants to understand the concerns that you have about being here. So why don't you write your concerns about being either in this course or anything else, any concerns that you have about being in this university? Because notice that these students are also first-year students, because introductory physics is the first course that physics majors, math majors, engineering majors take, right? So they were given a sheet of paper, and they were writing about this thing, because they were told that physics department wants to understand your concerns so that we can actually do something about it. And guess what? Students wrote a lot. Basically in 10 minutes, they had to be told to stop, because most students just kept writing. And here is a typical thing, like this woman wrote, I am extremely worried that I have wrongly overcalculated my mental abilities by ending up in this engineering program. Right now, all information that I'm learning in my classes isn't new, but I'm still not seeming to do well as I had hoped. It worries me because seeing so many smart people around me, I feel like I don't belong here. I'm also concerned about time management and my ability to create good social, healthy academic balance in my life, et cetera, et cetera. You can see that the student is really worried. And we find at University of Pittsburgh, more than 90% of the students actually write about their, really about a lot of different kinds of concerns about being in that physics course. So many students, regardless of their gender or race, they're concerned about being there, right? after they do this, then we actually show them some quotations from graduating senior, which are designed to highlight how they also struggled, but they overcame challenges and their initial loneliness, and they actually really excelled and did well in that physics course. They all got A grades. And you know, some of those names are actually, you know, female name, like this one is Allison. And, you know, it says, oh, she's a Pitt electrical engineering major. But if you look at this thing, what she's really saying is that, you know, I was really concerned about being in this course, but then I worked hard, worked smart, took advantage of all my resources. I went to the instructor's office hour. I worked with my peers, and there may not be like any aha moments, but, you know, I kept working. I basically also went to the TA's office hour, and lo and behold, I ended up doing really well at the end, right? And, you know, we see these kinds of quotations to the students on the screen from like several students, you know, and these are real quotations that have been slightly curated. So a few of them have been combined. And so the point is that, you know, when students see this, they're like, oh, I can do this too. And the fact that some of them are men, some of them are women, etc. So they feel good about it. And at this point, what they're asked to do is they're asked to get together in small groups, like of 5 people, and discuss with each other what they wrote about, you know, in their own narrative, you know, like whatever they had written on paper. And also, why don't people realize that, you know, struggle is common and that it is a good thing that people are struggling, because that's the only way to learn something new, and you're in college to learn something new. And also to think about how would things be different when you are a junior or senior, you know, so think about, you know, how these things will actually impact you if you worked hard and worked smart. So there was all this group discussion about those things. And then we told each of these groups to actually report back and say, what did your group say? What did your group say? And guess what? Each of those small groups are discussing with each other. And what people realize is that men and women, they were all saying the same kinds of things. Regardless of their race, they were all saying the same kind of thing, that I'm really worried about how I'm going to do here. You know, am I really smart enough? So I think that makes people's anxieties go down, especially those of women who are more worried about those kinds of things. When they hear that men are also saying the same thing, they feel a lot better. And also, when students started to report out from each group, what they found is that other groups were actually saying the same thing too. Okay, this is it. This is the end of the activity. This is what we did. And what we find is that at the end of this activity, students actually really felt good. Sometimes they even clapped for those people who had gone to facilitate these things. Sometimes, you know, at the end of the class, women would even come and say to them, thank you so much for spending half of the recitation class on this, because, you know, we could have actually done problem solving for the entire class, but I'm feeling so much better. And now I know that working hard and working smart and, you know, struggling is a good thing, because I was really worried about that. And I'm so glad to know that everybody struggles. You know, all the men were also saying that they are struggling. They are also worried about being here. That makes me feel so much better, because oftentimes people worry about the fact that they might be the only ones in that situation. They don't realize that other people also have similar kind of concerns. And if you are a minority, then you will worry about those things even more than if you're not a minority. So like a woman in physics, right? So that is it, right? And if that was the end of it, by the way, and the students also started working with each other, and they started saying, oh, you know, I really actually, is there anybody else in the tower? Tell me, you know, like, can we do our homework sets together? Let's work together in this physics class. You know, let's actually do, you know, studying together. So they also became more open to working with other students. And if that was the end of it, I would, again, still have felt good about this whole thing. But then when we looked at the course grades of the students, of men and women, so the brown one is women and the blue one is men. And if you look at the social belonging group, what you see, this is the final exam performance, and you see that men and women are doing comparably, as opposed to control group in which, you know, women are not doing as well as men. Okay, so notice that this is one-time activity you do at the beginning of the course, and it kind of sets the stage for students' defenses. It has them think about the fact that struggling is common, struggling is normal. Even the person who is doing their teaching their recitation has gone through the same kind of struggles when they were there in their shoes. And that is good, because that is the only way to learn anything new, right? So they should be just working hard and smart, taking advantage of all the resources, going to the instructor's office hour, going to the TA's office hour, working with their peers, and they will do well. And here you see that the gap between, so in other words, this is like water on parched land. It helps women much more than it helps men, although it doesn't hurt men, right? So here I am showing you data because the colleague who actually helped us implement it in physics, Kevin Binning, he also actually, this is the data that which is for physics by gender. You know, red is the intervention group, blue is the control group. And you can see that in the intervention group, there is no difference between men and women, whereas in the control group, there is difference here, right, the blue one. Here we are showing data by race for white students or non-white students. And again, the trends are very similar. You can see that in the orange curves for the intervention group, you can see that there's very little difference between the control and experimental group. On the other hand, there is much more difference here. Here you see the same kind of thing for biology classes by gender and race. So the same study was done by one of my colleagues, you know, who helped us also in physics, in biology, and they found similar results there. So the point is that short activity about these things actually helped close the gap. And we are actually now doing professional development of the teaching assistants to make sure that they actually do these activities on their own, right? And we don't have any control group anymore because it was helping students so much that we actually want to just do it in all of our recitation classes. And we are looking into the long-term effects of these kinds of things because, you know, in middle school and high school classes, these kinds of interventions have been done in science, in math classes. And what they have found is that even 9 years later, they have found that those students who went through the intervention are actually doing well. Now, I also want to say that the mindset of the instructor itself is also very important. You know, you need to yourself have a growth mindset about your students' potential. So there was a paper that came out like 2 years ago from Indiana University that shows that instructors who themselves have growth mindset about their students' potential, that means instructors who think that all of my students in this class can do well, okay? They don't think only the top, 30%, that means the ones who came with the best prior preparation, they don't think that those are the only students who'll do well, and all the rest of them I don't care about, because those kinds of instructors have fixed mindset, right? The ones who say, 25% of the students will fail, those kinds of instructors themselves have fixed mindset. You shouldn't be expecting that their classes will show much gain. So the class, if you want to show gains, you yourself as an instructor first need to have growth mindset, because only then can you come across as authentic and will be able to convey to your students what you are thinking and what you are really saying when you say that, no, it is really about working hard, working smart, failing, getting up and running and patting yourself on the back for struggling and saying, yes, I'm learning from it. Every time I learn, I'm going to get better at this, and I'll keep going till I get better at it, and then I'll be at the next step and the next step and the next step and the next step, and I'll keep making progress. But you yourself as an instructor needs to have a growth mindset about the potential of your students. Does that make sense? The other thing that I want to say is that these kinds of issues are also important in mentoring students when you're mentoring them in research labs. Right? And it's particularly important for women and students who might be first-generation students. Maybe their parents did not do research. They didn't go to undergraduate research or graduate research programs. So in that case, research never moves in a straight line. A lot of things don't work. And the point is, you need to convey this to the students that struggling is normal part of doing research. You're not going to always go in a straight line. It's kind of zigzag, zigzag, zigzag. So long as you're drifting in a certain direction over a period of time, you are doing well already. So I think that, that is a really important thing that people should convey. And if you want to be inclusive mentor, then it's really important to create a bias-free and supportive environment where everybody is respected, everybody has a great sense of belonging, and has a high sense of self-efficacy to embrace their struggle and use them as a stepping stone to learning and excelling. I want to give an example of this person. Her name is Eileen Pollock. She actually was the first female to major at Yale University in physics. And, she actually wrote this book in 2016 called The Only Woman in the Room. And she basically talks about how her undergraduate advisor, because at Yale University, all the undergraduates had to do research in order to actually get their degree. And so her work was actually in theoretical field. And so she said that when I solved that problem that my advisor had given to me, I ran to my advisor triumphantly. And I actually wanted to show him that I've solved the problem so that he would tell me, oh, Eileen, you should actually go to grad school. You've done so well. And so when she knocked on his door and she showed him the problem, he just said, oh, that's it. He didn't say anything. He just said, okay. And so she said that instead of feeling triumphant, now she felt like she had gone to the bottom of the ocean. She went crashing down because she felt like this must have been some really trivial problem that the advisor didn't even care about that he had given to her. And she still wanted to ask him, do you think that I am good enough to go to grad school? But she said, if I needed to ask him, then I really wasn't worth, I wasn't, and if he wouldn't tell me that, then probably I was not, good enough for grad school. And so she decided to actually do her graduate work in English instead of physics. And now she's an English professor at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. So what is interesting is that, recently when she was writing this book, she went back and the person who was her undergraduate thesis advisor, he was still there. And she had breakfast with him. And this time, 30 years later, she's so much, more mature. So she asked him point blank, what did you think about my thesis? And he said, oh, Eileen, I remember it. Oh my gosh, nobody does theoretical things as undergrad. I must say yours was exceptional. And she got teary-eyed. She's like, really? Why didn't you tell me then? I would have still been a physics major. Physics is my first love. I really wanted to do physics. I quit because I didn't think I was good enough. Do you ever actually encourage anybody to go to grad school? And he said, oh, no, I never do, because, I don't want to give them the wrong impression because, grad school is so hard. If I praise them and tell them to go to grad school, they'll get the wrong impression. But what you are doing by not recognizing students, not praising students, not telling them that they're doing well and they should be going to grad school and things like that, you are actually going to hurt the people who have lower self-efficacy, people who actually often are women or other minority people, or people who are first-generation college students, because they don't know, what is good work, right? They don't have role models. They haven't seen, other people like them. And so they might be like, oh, maybe I'm not good enough to do this. So I would suggest that you really actually recognize your students, and wherever the opportunity arrives, and this is not just in research, even in your classes, if you affirm your students, if you tell them they're doing well, even when they're making small progress, tell them that they're making small progress. That's a good thing, because that will get them even more enthusiastic about doing even better and doing even better. And those kinds of things can actually really show a lot of improvement over time for each student's trajectory. So what I want to actually say to you, that you must recognize the fact that as an instructor, you have a lot of power to empower your students. And your recognition, your support, your mentoring, and your own mindset about the potential of all of those students can go a long way in helping all of the students and making them actually excel in the physics courses and other courses, other science courses. And so I want to end here by saying that there's so many negative stereotypes. And so if the learning environment is not supportive, a lot of people who are underrepresented are particularly likely to discount their potential. And our research shows that the group that is most vulnerable is also most likely to benefit from inclusive environments. So as you saw, women really benefited, right? And positive recognition by faculty can do wonders for underrepresented students in physics and increase their sense of belonging, interest, self-efficacy, and enthusiasm. So I really want you as an instructor to take the power in your hand and think about your role in empowering students and what you can do to make sure that all students become good at offense and defense both, right? And they all actually flourish as individuals and do really well in science and engineering. So at this point, I would like to stop and take questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think it's a very, very enlightening and also revealing lecture. And for me, you talking about offensive and defense. Just two strategies coupled together. Since we don't play really football here in Taiwan, so we it's hard to explain to our colleagues. Anyway, I think we are opening to the floor to questions. Please, if you want to, either you raise your hand or you unmute yourself and ask Professor Singh a question. Please go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Singh. Thank you so much for this talk. Yeah, it's really informative, and I've learned a lot. And also, I really like the idea of like offense versus defense, and also the fact that struggling is the only way to learn something. So my question is, if you would like to like do the social belonging and mindset of activity, like what do we need? What kind do we need? Like departmental support, or what does it take to have students buy into these activities? Like at the beginning, is there any students saying, why are we doing this? Why shouldn't we be solving problems? And also, if we tell the students that, well, when you encounter problems, you can talk to TAs, talk to your teachers, the faculty. But as you said, there are some faculty members in, like maybe in physics department, who tend to tell students that, well, physics is difficult. Many students fail, and you have to work hard. But or maybe they will just say, oh, it's an easy problem. Why can't you do it? So if they go to those professors, like probably that won't help. So what's your advice for how to make it work?
Mm-hmm. So I think that the instructor mindset is definitely very important, and so instructors must themselves have growth mindset about the potential of students, right? But notice that this particular intervention is actually extremely short. It only takes like half of your class time, and it doesn't need to be done in the recitation. You can actually do it in lecture also, right? I mean, the thing is, you can do it in lecture if you want. So in that sense, it is not very resource intensive at all. So the reason we at University of Pittsburgh right now are actually we do like an hour-and-a-half workshop for the teaching assistants each year now. Ever since we actually saw that it's showing so much benefit, now we just do it for all of the teaching assistants, and we have them all do it, is because we feel like it's good to train the teaching assistants in how to do it, right? But the point is that that is the only need, and you can actually just train the instructors, right? And instructors themselves need to actually have this belief that my students can actually do this thing. Because if that doesn't happen, then it will not, if you don't really feel like all of your students have the potential to do well in this course, then you think they're going to trust whatever message you're trying to give to them. You see, I mean, like what I'm saying is that there is actually trust issue here, right? I mean, they need to trust what you are saying. So if you're not authentic, if you're not trustworthy, because they're like, no, I don't trust this instructor, what this person is saying, because like your actions are not showing that, then I think that is not a good thing. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's really important to be authentic. Now, notice that we had also the first time around when we did it as a control study, we had sent 2 female teaching assistants with each of the recitation instructor, right, who was participating in this, all the six of them. Now, you might say, is it important to send, like, to have a woman do this intervention, or can anybody do it? The point is that I feel like anybody should be able to do it so long as you build that trust, you have that authenticity. But if you don't build trust, it's easier to build trust. If a woman says to the class, and female students are immediately likely to actually understand that adversity because they're like, oh, I identify with this person. But it doesn't mean that a male faculty is not able to, benefit, do things that would benefit students. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I guess my question then is, so if we have like colleagues in our department who don't buy into this growth mindset idea, do you know of any activities or things that we can do, maybe trying to convince them or change their mindset?
So actually, I think that is a hard thing to do. So sometimes changing people's mindset could be difficult unless people have thought and reflected on these issues a lot and many times, right? So for example, I think that in fact, there is this kind of an activity that people call value affirmation or self-affirmation, which basically means that you can ask, for example, the course instructors, or you can ask the PhD thesis advisor or undergraduate thesis advisor to write about their own beliefs about what they value. And if you tell them to reflect upon what are the kinds of things that they value, and then you actually tell them that these kinds of activities, like the ones that I am talking about, is really going to be productive for your students in your classes that you're teaching, or for the students that you're mentoring, they are much more likely to actually take it in a positive way. So it's kind of interesting. Like, I'll give you an example. So for example, people who smoke cigarettes, right? So if people who smoke cigarette, research has shown that if suppose they go to a doctor and the doctor just says, you stop smoking right now, this is a bad thing, right? Those people will become really defensive and they will not like stop necessarily, right? But if the same thing is done in a way where the doctor first asks them to reflect upon the values that they really, things that they really value and why they value them. And this is like that thing where you are kind of affirming your values about something, right? And once they actually start thinking about what are the things that are really important to me in life, not necessarily about smoking or anything else, but the point is like they're thinking about big picture things. And then the doctor slowly brings up this issue of, it's a good idea for you to, not be smoking. People are much more likely to stop smoking. So it sounds weird that, having that particular advice be preceded by something else that actually are things that you're reflecting upon that are really important for you in life will help you make a more positive decision and less and become less judgmental about those advice, right? So the point is that, potentially those kinds of things could help even in this situation where you think that the instructors might themselves have fixed mindset, if they would be willing to reflect upon their values, big picture values, and then you actually, say, for example, go over this kind of thing that I talked about today, and then they started thinking about these things and the potential of their students and how all the students had potential and how they could all actually, with appropriate support, mentoring, and guidance, could really shine and flourish, right? And we should really be thinking about all of them, not the ones who don't even need our help. Because the people who are in the top 20%, they can just do it on their own, right? I mean, they don't even really need you. Whether I am their instructor or anybody else is the instructor, it wouldn't even matter for those people. So really, we should be thinking about all of the students. And that's the point. But I think that for people who are more difficult and they seem to have fixed mindset, you might want to do some kind of like, stepping back, having them reflect upon some big picture things, and then bringing up these issues and talking about how this could impact. Because other studies have shown that even in those contexts, people have actually changed their minds about things that they otherwise were, not willing to do.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's really helpful. Thanks.
Thank you.
So other questions from the audience, please ask the questions and unmute yourself. Zhou 老师.
Yeah, I do feel like very helpful and for the like inclusive classroom environment. Definitely next semester I'm gonna try the inclusive classroom. In my class, I'm teaching like the calculus-based physics and mechanics next semester, and actually there are a lot of minority students and in my class because like however I do have some question about how to apply this inclusive recitation. So what is the size of the recitation class, and like when we give students some experience from previous students that like helps them to build confidence, I'm not sure like how many feedback or the experience do we share to a class. Does everyone in the recitation class rate the same experience, or they have like different experience from different students, and so they can exchange opinions between each other? So that's my question.
Thank you, Gongshin. So that's also a great question, just like Xian's. So here is the thing. So basically, you're right that recitation classes are a lot smaller. So there are only 40 students at the most 40, right? Generally, they're like 30. It's usually 30, but it can be up to 40. And the point is that, so they are smaller, but I don't think that so long as you're doing it in your class properly, the size of the class would really not really matter so much as the, authenticity with which you do it, right? And the connection that you actually build with the students. And with regard to like how many quotations do you need to show from successful students in the previous years, who have used those strategies, who have worked hard, worked smart, used their struggle as stepping stone to learning something more and more and more, and patted themselves on the back every time they're struggling. I think that, we only did like 5. And the point is that, but the thing is, those 5, the names that we wrote on the bottom were very different. Some of them looked like women's names, some of them were men's names, some of them were racial ethnic minority student names, some of them were white name. So it was a mixed thing. So, and all of the students were saying in their own words very similar thing. And those statements were very, similar to the kinds of things that the students had actually said. Right. And so the thing that, so notice that each person is writing about their own their own concerns, and soon they are going to compare it with like other people in those small groups of 5. But knowing that people who have just succeeded in the last year also had similar concerns, but when they actually implemented, when they said no, really the key to excelling here is working hard, working smart, taking advantage of my struggles, patting myself on the back, and working with other students, working with the TA and the instructor, going to those office hours and things, and then I'm going to do well. I think that this is something that, you should be trying to do in your course also. So I think that, you don't need that many quotes, but if you want to actually tweak the quotes that, I can send the quotes to you, like if those things, but if you actually want to tweak it based upon like your own students' things, then that is fine too, because you can always tweak it to your own place. And you might actually want to give some of those surveys to the students. By the way, we also see that the self-efficacy of women. I didn't show you data on that because that is a paper that is that we are right now writing. But the thing is, self-efficacy of women actually improves in the group in which this intervention was done.
Thank you. Yeah, and because in my class there are like minority student from say Tibet or like some other minority area. So I think I would definitely try that and see whether this works for these students. Thank you, Dr. Singh. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that sounds like a great thing. That'll be really cool. Looking forward to hearing how it goes.
Yeah, thank you so much. In closing, I should mention that we are also cooperating with Professor Singh on the project which is on general physics, which is to have the person in charge. In fact, it's Professor Lin Siyin, and which is to test the attitude of the students before and after taking the general physics course. Put it simply. And from what Professor Singh's lecture today, we learned a lot. I think that we have a lot of things to learn from you and to work with you. And then for those the audience, the professors and teachers in audience, if you're interested in joining, please contact us, and then we could so to say work together and improving the physics and science education in Taiwan. Thank you so much. Professor Singh, it's getting late. It's almost 10 o'clock, in Pittsburgh. And
well, thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be here, and it's also really wonderful to see my former students, wonderful students that I love.
So much, Dr. Singh.
So
thank you.
I'm already talking to Professor Linda when the pandemic is over, we will invite you to visit Taiwan, and please to come.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Thanks so much.